Hey everyone, I'm Rachel,
And I'm Jen, and welcome to Devilish Bookworms, the podcast.
where we read and review books and release episodes every Tuesday.
This week we have Last Stop Ground Floor. When Nick arrived in hell, he didn't realize there'd be rules by David Wilson.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Just a quick disclaimer. In this episode, we will be discussing gun violence, harm toward children, body horror, and gore. So listener discretion is advised.
Yes, very much so. One day, a high school student named Nick decided to make every parent's nightmare come true by planning and executing a shooting. He finds himself right where he deserves, in hell. As he is escorted through his new prison by an unexpected guide, Nick's true colors begin to shine through, and we discover whether or not he is finally able to play by the rules. So, Rachel, what did you think of this book?
I think that this book is definitely not for the faint of heart. Um, this book or this novella was written with an intention. So it doesn't necessarily go through the um, same kind of roller coaster, I guess you could say, as like a normal story. So Nick is, we see him after the quote unquote event, which is a school shooting. Um, and so when we are introduced to him, he is in an elevator going to where we find out is hell. And then he's basically escorted through hell by a guide and told all of the different rules, what's expected of him. Um, so there is a plot, but not in the way that you would think. Basically, we're just along for the tour. And there were a lot of things that were touched on, a lot of topics, and a lot of there was a lot in it, even though it was a short book. But it wasn't like your average like storyline. You get, does that make sense? Like, am I right?
I would agree because it's definitely not your average story, uh, especially because of the fact that we already kind of get the conclusion in the beginning. Like he's in hell. All right. So we already start with all the information. But then you see how it all played out. We see different aspects, like different serial killers and murderers and cult leaders and everything that just gets brought into this book. And he literally stuffs so much information into this short of a book. And it's ridiculous how much is here.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, we do go on a journey, but it, like you said, like there's not much of a plot. There is, but there's not. Like we know he's in hell. We know he's this is his destination, and we know he's headed to his room. We're just finding out exactly what he is, what the rules are, what's going to be his eternity, basically. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a rough one.
It's it's almost like the author is bringing us on a journey of his opinions, for lack of a better term. He's very much voicing his frustrations.
Ideologies.
He's, yes, but not in a way. I mean, we're pretty open-minded in terms of, we like to hear people's points of view and their sides of things. So to me, it wasn't in a way that was kind of like preachy or anything like that. It was very much his voice and his opinions spoken through the guide, but um I really liked it.
Honestly, I'm right there with you. So I think the main reason that I really like it is because of the fact that we are getting a glimpse inside someone else's brain, and we all know that nobody thinks the same. So
Mhm.
what my concept of heaven and hell would be is going to be different from what yours would be, and maybe different from someone across the world. So
Mhm.
it's really interesting to see exactly what his concept of hell would be.
Yes. And like he did say, I read that he didn't necessarily want this to be a theological discussion, but he was using hell and Satan as a tool basically with which to deliver his ideas. Um
Mm.
and I mean, this is a person who has spent 20 plus years working in law enforcement and in the that kind of what was he? He was a
He was
corrections officer.
a criminal investigator, or
Hmm.
in the correctional facilities. So if something
Right.
happened inside the facilities, he was the one that went investigating everything to, squash it.
So basically, I mean, he's because of the line of work and because, first of all, it's not like he was working in Disneyland. He was working in prison and, there are of course discussions regarding our judicial system and prisons in general. Um but it's not like he was walking around with Mickey Mouse, right? Like he was seeing some awful, horrible, heinous things. And pretty much I can't even remember. I can't pull it up right now, but the dedication was basically to all the people who don't get to see justice done. All of the people that, you see someone awful on the street and you're like, man, that person really should get what they deserve. And then they don't. Or, you know, especially in the judicial system, or in his specific line of work, you don't really see people getting, I mean, not really to go too much like karma or like what people deserve, because people have different opinions on that too. But there are awful things that people do and they don't really get their comeuppance for it. So basically, he took all of that frustration and just shoved it in this 173-page book.
I couldn't believe that he was able to get it done in that little of pages, but he did. He really did.
Right.
I think what blew my mind the most was the fact that he used so many references. Now, we all know,
So many.
yeah, we all know Hitler. We all know O.J. Simpson. We all know um, Leatherface and Amityville Horror. And just, we all know these like big time crime people, and he brought in
Mm-hmm.
those people. But then he also, not only like Robert DeFeo Jr., but I mean, he brought in Marshall Applewhite and Jim Jones. And like, my mind was blown, okay? Because I knew about these mass suicides and murders from cults,
Mm-hmm.
but I literally thought it was the same leader, just in two different groups, and actually convincing them to all commit suicide while he didn't. But I I went down the rabbit hole with this book with all these references. I sat there for hours, and I hadn't made it through most of the book, and I'm sitting there googling person after person after
Mm-hmm.
person after person because he just kept bringing in so much. But so the fact that I had to sit there and like figure out who Marshall Applewhite was compared to Jim Jones, they're still both dickheads. They convince so many people to commit murder and suicide, and that's just disgusting. But it's just, the more you know, right? So
And this was definitely, I mean, if you audience member are into, and I say into because like it's not like he's not glorifying it at all. He is very much condemning the evil that it happens in the world. But there are so, as Jen said, there are so many references that are like not just like he doesn't just talk about David Berkowitz. Like he talks about people who you may have never even heard of. Chances are good you haven't heard of like two-thirds of the um references that he makes in here.
Yeah.
And like literally like everyone has their own wing. So essentially the way that the punishment is dished out is, you have your punishment, which is a series of tortures basically. And then it goes away, like your punishment finishes, and then you have X amount of not time, because time doesn't exist, to just sit and like dwell on the fact that it's going to come around again. And then it happens again. So like you have your torture, and then you have the anguish of like waiting for your torture. And then like all of these people are in their own little rooms, and they're in their own wings. So you have like your wing of cult leaders, your wing of Nazis, your wing of school shooters, your wing of serial killers. And he basically, they're just walking around, and every room, it was, I don't know, the amount of references, that we're sluts for references, and the amount that he packs in here is just insane.
When I say hours, I'm not even kidding. Like, I have so many notes on just like the different people that he brought into it, because as Rachel just said, that there was so many that you really didn't know. And I appreciate that. Like, I appreciate the fact that he brought in all the people that we would know, like Ted Bundy, and I already said like Leatherface and Hitler and all that. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, then he brought in Casey Anthony. That's more recent.
Oof, that punishment. And he goes into detail on what their punishments are. Hers was justified. Thank you very much and good night.
And the sad fact of it is, so if you haven't heard about the Casey Anthony case where, you know, she, I'm going to use it just plainly, she may have killed her daughter, and then she sent him on a chase to find her, and she was in the woods behind the home or somewhere around there. It was like a half a mile away from the house or something along that line. And this mother went out and partied and had got tattoos the night her daughter was missing. So I say allegedly or supposedly because of the fact that she is currently not serving time for any of it. So it's like you get little bits like that. So he still put her in the book, even though she may not be serving time, but he delivered punishment to Casey Anthony that she quote unquote deserved for what she did. But like I said, the case is closed and it is said that she didn't do it. We all have our opinions on the matter. I'm not here to say whether she did or didn't, but either way, her punishment was doled out in this book, and it was gruesome. It was gruesome.
It was. But I think that that's kind of the perfect example of him taking his frustrations and focusing them into um the book. And he talks about so many concepts too, right? Like it's not even just like he goes into explain why certain punishments are dished out and to whom. So like who goes to hell? Is it the person like giving the order, or is it the person taking the order? Or like what does it mean if someone commits a heinous act and then finds God? Or um you know and I think those were my favorite parts, was when it wasn't just about you know this is what Stalin did and therefore he gets XYZ, because humans are more nuanced than that, right? Like they're more, what is it that is true evil? Is it, you know, the soldier who's doing his job, or is it the and he does differentiate it in this way. Is it the person who's giving the order, the soldier who's doing his job, or the soldier who's going off the rails? Those are completely different, and it's the thought that he put behind the punishments and who gets what and why. That was my favorite part by far.
Yeah, especially when he brought in the whole purgatory. So
Hmm.
if they're not exactly good, but they haven't really done something necessarily too evil, they have that chance to kind of redeem themselves. But it's not like the way that he describes it is really great because of the fact that he's like, it's not those people that, you know, did quote unquote find God after doing a school shooting or something like that. They don't get off with that. They're completely held liable for doing the shooting because they're disgusting for that. And then he's like, but say the person that provided the gun, you know, he didn't know that you were going to do that. So is he wrong for providing the gun, or is he okay? He, and you know, there, that area, type of area is kind of reserved for that person because yeah, he sold the gun, but it wasn't the intention for it to be used during a school shooting. But like, is he like a hardcore gun nut if he, or is he like, okay, here's a gun to protect yourself? He could go up, he could go down, he's got a choice to make. And it's like, I love that. I I'm not a religious person, but I love the fact of the matter he put so much thought into what each system should be, what, where people would land. So it kind of brings me to like the fact of different perspectives of the afterlife, because you obviously we get David's perspective on what he believes heaven and hell and purgatory should be. But like you, I know that you have a belief in the afterlife, and I question whether your vision is somewhat similar to his depiction of hell or if yours is a different.
Oh, okay. So if we're gonna we're just gonna go into it. Okay. So I um I think that my beliefs more closely, they're not too far off from I suppose what he has. They are in a certain aspect that I don't necessarily want to discuss just because of spoilers. But I
Right.
do believe that our our heaven and our hell is catered to us, right? I mean, frankly, the world is inconceivably huge. And then if you think about, you know, an afterlife, or if you believe in an afterlife, there is no restraint. It can, you know, so I don't think that there's like a space problem in terms of us being able to have our own heaven and hell. But I do think I take a very much a I suppose kind of like a the good place or a supernatural kind of take on it, where it's we're all commingling, right? We're all like in our shared space, but we also have our own spaces too, because I don't think that any place could possibly be a heaven if I don't have the people that I love around me.
Okay.
um but I also don't believe that it has to be like one way or the highway, you know what I mean? Because
Okay.
then that wouldn't be heaven either. So I think that it's kind of like a I think it's kind of like a an area like you know what the best, oh my god, I'm so sorry that I'm using this as a descriptor, like the house of Madrid, is it Madrigal in Encanto, how like there's the house that has like the main area where everyone lives together, but also like each room is their own world. That's kind of like what my idea of heaven and hell is. Except one's
Okay.
nice and one sucks.
Okay. So the reason I had to ask that is because of course, like you know that I'm not a religious person, so I don't believe in heaven or hell. Like I,
Mhm.
it's just, it's not a concept that I have in my brain.
Yeah.
But if I was to envision there being a hell, it would be along the lines of, you know, vigorous torture, you know, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Maybe a little bit of the gore. But I honestly couldn't envision what heaven would be like to me. So
Mhm.
it's like I love getting different people's views of what heaven and hell would be like for them, because someone that doesn't believe in it, it's interesting to see how many different depictions there are of hell or heaven, and
Sure.
it's really crazy.
The best way I can describe my opinions or my beliefs is I actually just thought of the perfect example, and that is if anyone has ever watched Lucifer. Jen, I don't think you have.
I've seen bits here and there.
Yeah, not enough to know what I'm talking about. You need
Okay.
to watch it. It's fantastic. But so it's kind of like every person has their own room, right? But people have their own hell. My hell is different from your hell. And David's hell is different from my hell because like his hell is people are being tortured for what happens, right?
Hmm.
My idea of hell is kind of it's different in that I guess it's kind of like more not more science based, but like so if my personal hell was watching my loved ones being hurt, right?
Hmm.
Then it would be that, or it would be an instance where I failed XYZ. So anyone out there who's seen Lucifer, you have an idea of what my heaven and hell looks like.
Okay. Interesting.
um so Jen, without giving names, because I kind of this is a weird book because of the fact that like there are spoilers. Kind of yes, but also not.
Yeah.
So without naming names, being a little bit vague, who was your favorite character if you could choose one?
Um, to be honest, I loved the guide. I mean,
So did I.
he was just he was the right amount of arrogant and cunning,
Hmm.
and I absolutely loved his character. Even though I don't love who he was supposed to portray.
Right.
I guess that would be the way I would say
No,
it.
I 100%. Yeah.
I don't love I don't love his character, but I love his attitude.
Because you know why? And like I'm so glad that this book had surprises
Yes.
because yes, we're just going to leave it at that. But my favorite quote is every sentence that the guide said. Every sentence, like every
Oh
anything
gosh.
that the guide says that's disparaging to Nick, dude, I can't. Hold on. He says, I specifically pulled out this one little bit. He says, I've got news for you. It was nobody's fault other than your own. It doesn't matter if your parents ignored you. It doesn't matter if other kids picked on you. It doesn't matter whether or not you grew up in poverty or if you were rich. You decide how you decided how you were going to deal with life. No one made that choice for you. Like it was like
Yes.
he was laying down the law and like he would be like, don't interrupt. It's rude. My favorite quote um is well, to begin with, I hadn't finished speaking before you felt the need to interject. Now, had I?
Uh so I don't know if you've ever watched The Magicians.
I haven't. It's been like lukewarm on my to-do list because uh, like it looked good. It looked good, but it didn't look like I need to watch it now.
It is good.
I'd rather
It
watch
gets
Buffy
annoying.
again.
Well, it gets a little annoying, but Elliot, he is my favorite. Okay.
Smelly it?
Yes. Okay.
Sorry, we won't explain that.
No, we won't. So he is literally the fucking best. He's got this snippy, arrogant attitude, and all I could literally envision was Elliot doing this walk. And I can't explain that further, but he would be the perfect person to play this role.
There's so much going on right now in terms of like you can't explain further why Elliot is a thing or why the thing is a thing, and I can't explain why Elliot's a thing, and we can't do spoilers. And there's so much we know what we're talking about.
Yes. And honestly, read this book because of the fact not only are you going to get educated, I'm going to say it that way, educated.
Educated.
So not only are you going to get educated on different aspects of crime, punishment, hell, and torture, uh, but you're going to appreciate some of the witty banter that goes on during this guide.
That's totally one-sided. The guide is totally cracking himself up.
He really is. And I mean, at one point he's like, yeah, you're stupid and no one really gives a shit about you. And I'm just like, I'm dead. I'm fucking dead. Like, this guy's getting so pissed off and getting ready to scream at you. And he's like, oh, well, you know what? I don't give a shit. You're a piece of shit. I'm
Yeah.
like, ah, yes, I
And
love
like,
it.
God, I can't even explain my favorite parts because my favorite parts are like when he's like, you don't even have any class, or like you didn't even have any um finesse or anything in what you did, blah blah blah. You know what I'm talking about, but that's not
Oh,
spoilers.
yes.
Like
Oh, your crime took 2 seconds of thinking. Meanwhile,
mm,
I took years of
mm,
planning. I'm like,
stop it.
ugh.
So I do need to specify that we are not saying the guide is not in any way, shape, or form a good person. No one in this book is a good person. And it's not the best way I can say it is it's not the guide that I'm loving right now. It's David's voice filtered through the story that I'm loving right
Yes.
now. It's his little quips. It's his little, you know, jabs with a knife that's serrated into the spine. You know what I mean? That's what I'm loving right now, not the guide himself.
I think that's kind of like the biggest thing that the author wanted us to take away from this was the fact that, this is his voice, but at the same time, I'm going to say a thing. And don't come at me
Mm-hmm.
for saying a thing because I'm saying this because I believe this is what the author wants.
Me don't come after you?
No, people, the people, please don't come after us.
Oh, gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. Sorry.
No, you're fine. So I want to say that the author is trying to make his readers feel that we need to hold people more accountable for their actions. Because as he says at one point, we as a society tend to let the blame fall on others. So if someone does go and do this awful thing and they say, oh, well, it's so and so's fault because they treated me this way, we go, oh my gosh, yeah, you're right. Oh, you did have a hard time. So therefore, we should treat you a little bit
Mm-hmm.
better because you did have a hard time. And I think he's literally just trying to voice that instead of treating these people that are literal pieces of shits that are killing children or, you know, convincing people to commit suicide because of such and such belief and whatnot, he wants the people to be held more accountable instead of making excuses for them. They were awful before someone did something else to provoke them. They were still an awful person. He even put into perspective where you could have two people that are of equal age and gender and upbringing, and they both hurt themselves in a certain way and they're both given opioids to recover. One person could be like, oh, well, I got to deal with the pain and make it through the rest of it. And the other one could get addicted and then hurt his family and steal and lie and, you know, have an addiction to the pills. And he brings up the fact that we say addiction is a disease. And then he replies with the whole fact of, but that person was the person that made the choice to continue to try to seek out something else to help his pain instead of going to physical therapy and doing the right thing. Or he chose to steal money to further his addiction. and we sit there and say, oh, it's a disease, it's okay. Like, I understand where he's coming from, and I understand where society is coming from with it's hard and it's not easy to beat an addiction, but I understand where he says we can't just, you know, wave him off of all the shitty things that they've done because of their addiction.
But I completely understand what you're saying. It's very clear through the work that he believes, or it's clear in the work that the message is that people are not absolved just because of rough circumstances, and he very much does give us the responsibility for our actions. And
Mhm.
i will not I will not condemn nor condone anything in this book, because it is, I mean, it's a book written by someone. It has their opinions and it has their creativity and it has their things, just like every other book that we've read.
Yeah.
Um, if someone is looking for my opinion on it, um, the only person that can have that is Jen. Um, but I very much would say, if you are the kind of person who likes to dive into, the different ways that you can look at good and evil, right or wrong, the different nuances of, the human condition. I and you don't mind a little bit of gore and um, blood and constant splinters, then I would definitely say check out this book.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Rachel said, we don't condemn or condone anything in this book. I mean, what I believe is not going to be what you believe, and what he believes might not be what you believe. But at the same time, I thought it was a great just difference of opinion from what my own opinions are. But this is, again, not for the faint of heart and not for the easily offended.
Or easily upset.
Yeah, it's a lot to handle, but if you can handle it, it's well worth it. It's worth the read.
All right. So this book, as we said, was written by David Wilson, who has been working in the law enforcement line of work for the last 20 years. He is from Maine, and he has his own website, which is twoseasons.org. That is TWOSEASONS.org. On his website, you can see his books. Some of his books are actually funny and some are serious. He does have a memoir. He has links to buy on his website. There's learn about the author section. His upcoming events, things like that are all on there. And he's really active on Facebook, and you can get to his Facebook via the link on his website.
So next week we will be reading Fogbound by N.J. Alexander.
Yay!
So this one's a complete different type of book from what we're reading this week. We're kind of all over the place lately, and I love it.
All over the place.
Yes.
All right, everyone. Well, we will see you next week.
Yes, don't forget to like, subscribe, and do all the things, and follow us on all the things.
Okay, love you. Bye.
Bye.